What's going on, everybody? This is Mark Bruce, and welcome back to episode 6. This is going to be a two-part series, and part on how I design programs for athletes. In part 2, I'm going to talk about how I design programs for what I call blue-collar athletes. And the definition of an athlete for me, for the sake of this video, is someone who's playing a sport competitively or financially. That could be a youth, middle school, high school, or collegiate athlete, playing for a school championship, seeking out a scholarship, or someone who is playing for a financial return. Now, how I program and what I look for in athletic development is teaching them how to, triple extend at the ankle, knee, and hip, and how to master the movements they're going to see in their sport. It's going to work in the frontal, the transverse, the sagittal plane. So they need to be efficient in those areas when it comes to cutting, jumping, sprinting, moving laterally, moving multi-directionally. They need to move in a way where they're safe but also effective. I've adopted Mike Robertson's R7. I like how he laid it out. It really helped me visually plan for athletes that I work with. So the first is to reset or release. That could start with soft tissue work. It could be something more static stretching to help the athlete get into those patterns that they need to master for their sport. Next, it's a readiness phase. The readiness phase is a dynamic movement preparation. And from there, we'll do a series of dynamic movements, and that'll let me see where they're currently at. It can show me, can they stand on one leg? It can show me, can they do a lunge pattern? Show me, how do they crawl? It's also a phase where we activate their core, so their glutes, their adductors, their hip flexors, their trunk, all those muscles of the posterior chain are firing appropriately. Next, the reactive phase. Now, with that reactive phase, that's those specific movements they may see in their sport. If it's a young athlete, we're gonna focus on everything. We're gonna make sure that they can get in an athletic position safely and effectively. I'm gonna make sure that they can land, they can stop, they can cut under control, they can accelerate, they can reach top end speed, that they're powerful using medicine balls. And then from there, go into the resistance phase. And that resistance phase is things we'll do in the weight room. Depending on the athlete and where they're at, we'll begin with just primal patterns, focusing on the squat, the hip hinge, the lunge, pushing, pulling, both in the horizontal or vertical plane. We'll focus more on some trunk stability, and then we'll progress to learning how to do triple extended movements, maybe some Olympic lifts, maybe something with a medicine ball or a battle rope, something that gets their ankles, knees, and hips firing all at once, because those are the movements that they need to have in order to be successful in their sport. Next, we have the regeneration phase. Now, this is conditioning based. It could be metabolic conditioning. It could be something that's going to help them prepare for their sport, so we can condition the trunk. We can condition those small intrinsic stabilization muscles to help prevent injuries. For instance, the baseball player, we want to make sure that their shoulder is stabilized and strong. Basketball players, we want to make sure their knees and ankles are healthy. It could be something where we focus on postural corrective movements. And then last, it'll be the recovered phase. A static stretch, something to cool down the body, something to implement if there's a huge asymmetry in their movement. So that's kind of how I lay out a program for an athlete, someone who's playing a sport or a professional athlete who relies on that financial income. It's important to know that a lot of these athletes, they're getting their skill work in. A lot of that basketball players that I work with, they're doing the skill, so it's also important to implement the strength training and the turf work, the sprint work, the plyometric movements, because that'll make them more effective when they bat or baseball, football, whatever it might be, a soccer ball. This part of being an athlete is very important because it's going to prevent injuries, and that's number one. So that's part 1. My name is Mark Bruce. Stay tuned for part 2.